Chapter 14, Sunny Day. With a calculation in mind, Durua did not rush out of the space, slowly staying a bit. There was still some time before dawn. Looking around, her eyes caught sight of each medicinal field. Inside were planted all kinds of medicinal herbs, and these medicinal herbs at first glance could be seen to be old, at least a few dozen, a few hundred years, at most even 1,000 years. The time in the space was synchronized with the time outside, so the time these medicinal herbs grew was the current era. This place has many medicinal herbs that are not all from the same world, but they are currently all living in her space. This is what she has harvested from several lifetimes of rebirth, and it also proves that what she has experienced is not a dream. She normally does not enter the space often, even though the Grand Master of Alchemy was refining the pond before, and specially for her, she built a small hot spring and a simple wooden house, so that she could rest after taking care of the medicinal herbs. But she remembered that her original wish to have a space was to practice medicine, not for herself, and even less for enjoyment. Therefore, other than collecting the medicinal herbs she had collected into the space, over many lifetimes, she had only put in various acupuncture needles and various jade and jade ornaments, collecting them to more or less contain spiritual energy, and also to benefit the space. However, she did not know that everything in the world from the beginning until now is a cycle of cause and effect. There is a cause and effect. If she could not persist in her original wish, for her own enjoyment, she would bring gold, silver, jewels, and worldly things into the space, then the spiritual energy of the space would very quickly be almost completely depleted, turning into the lowest grade space for storage, and would not be able to follow the soul through reincarnation. Because she persisted, the new space would reduce the erosion of spiritual energy, and later, with her soul nurturing it, the space would be extremely well maintained, with abundant spiritual energy. At least there would be no need to worry about the spiritual energy disappearing one day. She also did not know about this. Even if she knew, to her, she would only feel happy. Her medicinal herbs could grow very well. She often thought that it was fortunate that she had only come to the cultivation world in her fourth life. Only after going through several lives could she have the determination to preserve it. Normally, except for using it for traditional Chinese medicine, she had never thought of using the space for her own gain in the ordinary world. In several reincarnations, she had used her own abilities to enjoy life and the pleasure she got when others respected her. Coming out of the space, she was worried that Aunt Lu would see the messy room, so she started cleaning it up. Suddenly, she was stunned, frowning at the bed sheet in her hand. This blood stain. Just remembered that last night she smelled a faint scent of blood on Qixin's body, but at that time her mind was restless, and she didn't pay attention. Now it seemed like he was injured. She couldn't think of it. If she didn't remember wrongly, in her previous life he wouldn't have returned so quickly, and it also seemed like he wasn't injured. She hurriedly washed her face, changed her clothes, grabbed her coat, and prepared to go out, suddenly looking at herself in the mirror, seeing in her eyes a kind of determination that she couldn't express. Not for others, only for herself. Although she couldn't remember too many things, she always felt that things were different from her previous life. If she planned to be with him, she wouldn't hope for anything unexpected to happen to him. Just went downstairs. Rua, good morning. Just now a girl called looking for you. Aunt Lu heard the sound of going downstairs, stuck her head out from the kitchen door, and told Durua that Xiang Xing was looking for her. She paused for a moment. The girl? Thinking for a moment. Xiang Xing. Did she say anything, Aunt Lu? She said she would come to the house to find you. Aunt Lu saw her early in the morning and dressed properly. Do you want to go out? Yes. She nodded. Aunt Lu, I don't eat breakfast. There's something, I want to go take care of it. Aunt Lu heard, immediately ran out to stop her. Unexpectedly she had already gone out. She opened the Volvo door. Just as she left the house, she saw a Porsche emergency brake in front of her car. This car belonged to Xiang Xing. Sure enough, Xiang Xing hurriedly got out of the car, blocking her car. She stepped on the brake, looked at Xiang Xing out the window, sighed, got out of the car, locked the car. The movements were smooth and seamless. Let's go. She looked at Xiang Xing, who was in a daze. Xiang Xing regained her composure, quickly got back into the car. and quickly returned to the hospital. Until Du Rua stood in front of Grandpa Chi, she still felt mysterious. "What do you say?" Yao Yuyu mysteriously pushed Xiang Xing, and in a short while, she brought the person back. Could it be that women's charm is quite great? Qin Yan also began to doubt her charm with Qi Shen. How did Qi Shen turn into a dead and alive person, and in the end, he was still inferior to Xiang Xing in this moment? Don't ask me. I'm also confused. Xiang Xing shook her head. Grandpa Qi. Du Rua bowed slightly in front of Grandpa Qi, not mentioning Qi Shen. Towards this old man, she was also very respectful. Grandpa Qi didn't think that she would come here. Seeing the little girl in front of him mature a lot, Grandpa Qi began to feel whether he really had aged or not, seeing things, but just a few months of not seeing each other, could the change be so great? Yes. Grandpa Qi seemed to be deep in thought as he replied, I heard Xiao Yan and them say that you flew to America at night. Du Rua pursed his lips and nodded. I booked a plane ticket, I'll be flying at 8 tonight. Grandpa Qi's sharp eyes discovered that the three brats had already run away when he spoke, and he let out a heavy humph in his heart, looking towards her. Rua, Grandpa doesn't quite understand what happened between you and him during that time, but his parents, and I always hope that our grandchild and you will be happy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given him such a chance. However, if he failed in the end, it would be his fate. After speaking, he looked at her with a serious expression. Grandpa Qi Du Rua looked towards the door of the ward, with a smile, softly said, Now I understand clearly, in this world who is worthy of my respect. Grandpa Qi saw the determination in her eyes, couldn't help but be absent-minded for a moment. But couldn't help but feel happy for his grandchild. At least this life will be happy? Sigh, but never mind, no matter what, in any case, he himself did not separate the fate of his grandchild. If he came here, it was fate, everyone has a fate. You stay here and watch. He waved his hand, stood up and walked home. The granddaughter-in-law was all here. What was this old man still busy about? Grandpa Qi, I'll take you back. Qin Yan and Yao Yu came out of nowhere, happily catching up with the old man, leaving space for the other two. Xiang Xing also followed, but after thinking about it, she still turned back, pulled Du Rua to the side, and asked in a low voice but not losing her determination, Du Rua. I hope you guys can be happy. Can you too? She looked at the beautiful girl in front of her, saw her widen her eyes because she hadn't seen her reply for a long time, then she smiled, We will. Will, definitely will. What was lost in the previous life will be made up together. Xiang Xing looked at her smiling, her eyes were dazzled, she touched her nose, she muttered, she was getting more and more beautiful, she turned around and happily left. Watching the people leave, Du Rua sat in the hallway for a while, secretly laughing bitterly in her heart, but she was a little nervous. Slightly frowning, it really felt like a long time. It seems like living 10 lives again is not that bad. Seeing the nurse inside had come out, she gently and slowly walked in, slowly walked to the front of the hospital bed, quietly looking at the man lying on the hospital bed. Hair cut short according to the standard, thick black eyelashes, nose, tightly pursed lips slightly pale. Even if he was lying on the bed sick, he did not show any weak aura. Last night did not turn on the light, now just saw. It was really still the appearance in the memory. In the memory was the moment when she last saw him. He was much colder than now. The person on the bed didn't know if he noticed her gaze or felt uncomfortable. He moved his hand twice. She reached out her right hand to hold his hand, wanting to check his pulse, but coincidentally he jerked and pulled it out. Her hand paused in midair, the corner of her mouth slightly raised. She glanced at the hospital room, pulled the chair and stood up. When she entered the door, Qi Shen was already completely awake at that moment. He didn't know why, he just didn't want to open his eyes. The two of them were always so exhausted. He felt her sitting beside him, suddenly felt his heart jump into his throat. When he was shot and injured he wasn't this nervous. He thought strangely, he didn't know if she could hear his heartbeat. Feeling her wanting to hold his hand, he pretended to be absent-minded and pulled it out, not letting her hold it. Oh, why is it the sound of standing up? Could it be that she left? He quickly opened his eyes, just in time to meet a pair of beautiful eyes that seemed to smile but not smile. She was standing not far from the bed, wearing a loose-fitting flannel leisure-style coat. Inside was a black dress revealing the skirt, below was black flat shoes, looking casual but revealing an elegant young lady. Really very beautiful. He secretly gritted his teeth in his heart. Damn beautiful. Why did he stay outside for 3 months in the wind and rain, receiving all the torture? This girl could live so comfortably, even her body was quite plump. He stiffly turned his head, not looking at her. She didn't care either, poured a glass of water and handed it to him. You just woke up, drink some water. He still didn't look at her. Put down the glass of water. She looked at him suspiciously. This person. Is this what it looks like? In her memory, before they broke up, he had always been doting on her, as if she had never seen such a thing before. Ah. How strange. She thought about it for a long time, the more she felt that her memory was unreliable. As if remembering something, the corner of her mouth twitched a little. Wouldn't it be because he fell ill that he became weak? Although she was a doctor, she had seen this kind of feeling quite a bit, but this man, could he have a relationship with that thing? She sighed softly, her mind was also a little chaotic. This made her nervousness lessen a bit. She reached out to press the button on the hospital bed. Who would have thought? Someone grabbed her arm, and in a blink of an eye, she was pressed down on the bed. He gritted his teeth beside her ear, and said word by word, "You just don't agree to be alone with me like this?" He felt that he was with her, especially bold. He naturally wouldn't feel that his temper was problematic, only felt that it was her fault. She couldn't help but mock in her heart. If it wasn't for her good health, even if the baby was there, he would have suppressed it a few times and lost it. Stand up. After hearing this, he was momentarily startled, thinking that he was being sentimental. She didn't care about him, so she came to look at him, didn't want to hear the words he didn't want to hear. Her whole body supported the force pressing on her, a casual appearance that she didn't hear anything she said. She struggled a few times, wanting to call the man on top of her to stand up, but before she could open her mouth, she saw him close his eyes tightly, as if he felt the uneasiness coming from his body. Her nose suddenly ached. Stand up. There was no movement. She thought for a moment, put her hand on his back. You still haven't four. He heard that, opened his eyes wide to look at her, then lay back down. Humph, I didn't notice. She squinted her eyes, and laughed softly. She noticed that his ears were slightly red, his skin was dark. If she didn't look closely, she wouldn't have noticed. Her heart softened. You want to suppress your child? Cough cough. Suddenly a light cough entered the ears of both people. She took advantage of his inattention, quickly and carefully pushed him away, stood up and fixed her clothes, leisurely said to the doctor standing at the door, "Hello, doctor." Very determined. Dr. Liang couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This daughter-in-law of the Chi family didn't look bad. Yeah, no need to be nervous. I want to go see if little Chi has woken up yet. Uncle Liang. Chi Shin had long since recovered his proper appearance. Not a trace of his previous scoundrel appearance could be seen. Dr. Liang stepped forward to check his wound. Satisfied, he nodded. It wasn't broken, his skills weren't bad, he reminded him. Rest well these few days, try your best not to touch water. When going out, suddenly revealed a meaningful smile. The movement also does not need to be too big. Unfortunately, here one person's expression is extremely serious, the other person is still smiling faintly, without the slightest change. Really not cute. Dr. Liang is upset and leaves. Du Rua lowered her head and smiled slightly. In fact, she knew what the doctor meant, other than wanting to tease her. It is also a reminder to be careful of her body. As a doctor, it is impossible not to see her current state. But obviously, someone does not know. She looked towards him, found that he was staring at her intently, his deep eyes filled with a bright light, and couldn't help but feel scared inside. He seemed to be very satisfied with her reaction, slightly raised his chin, looked towards the glass of water. I want to drink water. Looking at the glass of water on the shelf right next to someone, she frowned, still reaching out to give him the glass of water. He took the glass of water, then used the hand with the four to tightly grab her hand. She let him hold it, didn't escape, took a deep breath, raised her head and said to him in a low voice, "Let's talk." His hand paused for a moment, put down the glass of water. There's nothing to say between us. Could it be? He glared at her, you still want to go abroad? Thinking of this possibility, he held her hand a little tighter. I want to go abroad. She nodded, Still wanting to say something, suddenly her hand tensed up, already pulled in front of him, her lips heated up, he just happened to kiss her. He kissed her lips, crushing them hard, seemingly wanting to bite her lips off in his mouth. This girl, he hated not being able to eat her. Slowly, he slowed down the speed, no longer biting and biting angrily, bit by bit delicately passing through the breath of the person in his arms, gentle and lingering. He left her lips, holding her in his arms, and forcefully commanded her by her ear, I won't let you leave. His voice carried a slight uneasiness. She understood, she hesitated a bit, her two hands draped over his waist, leaned forward and gently kissed the corner of his mouth, then looked straight into his eyes. I want to go abroad to study medicine. When she kissed him, his eyes couldn't help but light up, suddenly feeling dizzy. However, very quickly this feeling was broken by her words. He looked at her, thought for a moment, and lowered his voice. Just because of this, you don't want our child? This answer was very important, regardless of whether it was right or wrong. He wouldn't pursue it anymore. It was just that he wanted to be with her for life. He didn't want to leave this knot. No. She didn't think about it, quickly replied. Ah? Then why? He frowned. She chuckled softly, took his big hand and placed it lightly on her belly. He heard her laugh, his brows furrowed even deeper. Suddenly, she took his hand and placed it on her belly. What was she doing? He obediently repeated and touched it a few times. Ah. Satisfied in his heart, he nodded. The feeling was not wrong. Your son is in here. Suddenly a voice with laughter came from his ear. His hand stopped. He raised his head in disbelief, looking at her. She silently smiled and nodded. He immediately stopped the four, jumped down from the bed, and wanted to run outside. What kind of reaction was this? She looked blankly at the person running outside, quickly stepped forward to stop him. Why are you in such a hurry? What should we do if you get hurt? She hadn't said anything yet. He was already like teaching a new recruit. She looked at him innocently. Where do you want to go? She pulled the person back. He was afraid of hurting her, so he had to follow her back. I'll go get someone to examine you. He said seriously, I'm afraid that I pressed you and the baby down last night. After saying that, he wanted to go out again. I'm fine. She insisted, you haven't finished the 4 yet. Really okay? He repeatedly expressed doubt. She calmly pulled the person back onto the hospital bed, picked up the needle, studied it for a moment, and helped to pin it. Don't pull it out. He couldn't help but frown slightly. Since when did she become so knowledgeable? She wanted to stand up, but he pulled her in front of him, his hand rubbing her belly. Don't check, let me check. Time passed by second. He groaned softly, kissed her forehead, his lips gently brushed her cheeks and eyes. Finally he stopped, hugging her for a long time. I'm really sorry. He buried his face in her fragrant hair. Ah. She raised her face, looking at him suspiciously. If I hadn't misunderstood, I wouldn't have left you alone for these 3 months. He lowered his head to kiss her again, hugging her waist, feeling like he was a bastard. She suddenly felt that she didn't need to worry about not being able to love this man. Just a simple sentence, easily brought out all her grievances. He painfully hugged her into his arms. Cry. Her head burrowed into his broad shoulder, remembering the pain of that life, remembering the 10 lives of reincarnation, vague and helpless, remembering every time she had to face everything alone, with no place to rely on, as if she wanted to cry out all the tears of 11 lives. Tears fell continuously. After a long while, she gradually stopped making a sound, seemingly a little embarrassed, burying herself in his neck, refusing to come out. No one discovered her at this moment. All resentment was dispelled. Only then did she truly come back to life. He tightly held her hand. Let's get married. From now on, no one can bully you. He also couldn't. Without marriage, no one could bully her, she thought to herself, until she felt her waist being tightly held, then she thickly nasally voiced, softly Immediately, she suddenly heard a low and happy laugh coming from her ear. She gently curved the corner of her mouth, baby, in the past life I owed you and your father, in this life, I will repay you many times over, okay?